Welcome back. In a time when some journalists parrot security service spokespeople, Google plans to censor so-called fake news, and the leader of the free world fires people on social media. You could think that you could sit in front of the TV and switch on a film to get away from government-controlled output. But you'd be wrong. According to research done by our next guest, the US government has had close involvement in nearly 2,000 movies and TV shows. Dr. Matthew Alford, co-author of National Security Cinema, The Shocking New Evidence of Government Control in Hollywood, and the star of the film The Writer with No Hands, joins me now from Bath in the southwest of England. Matt, welcome to Going Underground. We appear to be in the middle of some kind of conspiracy film here in Britain with a few facts. How would you see the coverage of the tragedy in Wiltshire through the lens of, or the prism of, say, Noam Chomsky's idea about media manipulation and the manufacture of consent?
Well, Russia seems to be, and has been for 100 years, a kind of official enemy. That's what the way that Chomsky would put it in the propaganda model. And official enemies are generally presented in more salacious ways than allies, regardless of what actions they are undertaking. It seems that this is just an extension of that. It always shocks me, really, that and I know this is a silly thing in a way to say on a Russian state TV show because it's kind of so obvious. But I mean, the last sort of 25 years, the Cold War's over. This should all have been put to bed a long time ago. Russia's got an economy the size of Italy. There is no threat from this country except for the way that, except for certain more minor actions, and it's kind of crazy that this is always being blown up into the biggest next thing when we have no evidence to point to Russian state involvement at this point, anyway.
What I want to know is your investigations and research suggests and emphasizes that we shouldn't be looking just at the way news may have preconceived notions about, say, Russia. You've done a lot of research on how Hollywood changes our perceptions.
Yeah, Hollywood's really important in terms of shaping the way that we see the outside world from the West. So, and that's what most of my work's been about for the past sort of 15 years, looking at how Hollywood, film industry, and TV as well, and video games shape the way that we see the outside world, shape the way that we see the institutions that govern us.
Well, some people might be shocked. Well, some people might be shocked at that connection. In recent days, the Pentagon has actually tweeted how proud it is to work with Ellen, Conan, The Price is Right, NCIS, Y50. Oprah, I know you've also investigated this. It's pretty much out in the open, though.
Well, they like to give the impression of openness. The Pentagon and CIA and White House have all worked with Hollywood producers for over 100 years. They want to show that they have good relationships so that they seem sort of normal and nice and all this kind of thing. But they also want to ensure that they're playing down the amount of cooperation that goes on between these entities, Hollywood and the government. And they also want to downplay how politicized that cooperation is. And of course, the relationship is very politicized, and it is very much more involved than anyone actually admits. I'll give you the key statistic on this, which is that until myself and Tom Secker did this research, the assumption and the current knowledge amongst academics and journalists was that perhaps a few hundred films and TV shows had been affected in some way by the Pentagon or CIA over the past century. But we've shown that it's several times more than that. It's actually several thousand products that have been affected. And some of these are affected in very political ways, including things that you perhaps wouldn't expect, like Meet the Parents and Iron Man and Hulk.
But of course, the Pentagon and the CIA would be quick to say all they are doing is correcting Hollywood productions, their scriptwriters, their directors, their actors, who knows, so that they get their perceptions of the U.S. military-industrial complex correct and don't make any mistakes.
Yeah, well, obviously there is some of that. It's a nice sort of cover story, and that is part of what's going on. But I'd say it's a very marginal part. I mean, in the end, yes, of course, the Pentagon's thinking, they're sort of telling themselves, I'm sure, oh, yes, we want to make sure that these medals are on this actor in the correct way, and we want to make sure that their hats aren't on the wrong way around. In practice, of course, they know that the agenda has to be much more political than that. They want to make sure that there is nothing that is confrontational information or dangerous information that is put out there that will make them look bad. Of course, that's what happens. Of course, any institution would do that.
Well,
So,
I mean, again, they also...
Would you ask McDonald's to give you to work on a film about cows and expect that McDonald's would not try and manipulate the content of that production?
But
you
of
don't
course,
need McDonald's to be the expert on cows.
But of course, they'd say also they wouldn't want any of these war films, particularly, perhaps more than, say, Ellen and chat shows, not to endanger the lives of US servicemen and servicewomen.
Well, I don't know if they actually go quite as far as that with their argument, because that would be really crazy. I mean, films are not national security products. They are not something that is going to affect on what's happening on the ground. The news might be if you report the location of a particular military personnel, then of course that may endanger people. But films are made, 2 years after the events actually happened in the real world, or even decades after. Even the Pentagon does not defend themselves along those kind of lines. Oh, we're trying to protect national security. They protect it on PR lines and on the fact that they say, well, this is for the sake of accuracy. But that's obviously bogus.
Oh, given all your research, then, any viewers of this show, what should they be aware of when they see a product, as you're calling them, an entertainment product released from the United States of America, from a country which, as I say, the Pentagon admits clearly they do want to alter the perceptions of the US military using entertainment, right?
Well, I mean, just be aware that it happens very frequently, that perhaps if you were watching a film with the military that's actually depicted in it, there's probably about a 50% chance that it's going to have been, that the script will have been gone through with a fine-tooth comb by the Pentagon and or CIA. If you think that sounds okay, then you're not going to be listening to what I say anyway. If you think that sounds like a dangerous thing for a government to have that kind of power, that kind of involvement, particularly behind closed doors, without a great deal of accountability. It's been very, very hard for us to acquire a lot of this information through Freedom of Information Act. It takes a long time. If you think that kind of closed way of approaching governance is a problem, then you're kind of with me.
So we should stick to British film, because that's fair and square, not allied to our military-industrial complex, hopefully.
Well, Britain doesn't have a great deal of a military complex, and the United States has a much more developed PR wing of its national security apparatus. But of course, any national cinema is the same, whether that's Russia or Britain or South Africa or whatever. Everyone has their national cinemas, and they all are operating for the good of those institutions when there is advice come in. The Americans do it so much more, though. It does happen a little bit with MI5. And a little bit with Israel and things like that, but our film industries are puny compared to Hollywood. So
you found no proof about the MI6 building blowing up in central London that was in the famous James Bond film. MI6 were nothing to do with the James Bond films.
There's been a bit of involvement from Mossad and MI5 in terms of supporting the Bond films. Yeah, we detail some of that in the book.
This is a new book.
But it's not as extensive. I mean, the main thing about what the Pentagon does is that it does it so kind of formally and officially. I'm about to go to an archive of material in Washington, D.C., where there are thousands of papers of scripts where where the Pentagon has written, change this, we want this amended, cross this out. That's what is so sort of structurally and done in such a kind of careful way by the American government. That doesn't seem to happen very much on with these other countries. There is obviously influence. The monarchy will be all over anything that's to do with the monarchy. But they won't have as the kind of level of interference. It's just not possible on a across the board as it is with the Pentagon.
Dr. Matthew Alford, Thank you.